Hi guys, and welcome back to another true crime and makeup time video. Today's case is an unsolved case and one that really leaves you stumped. I normally don't like to talk about unsolved cases. It really is frustrating, but I feel that today's case is especially important. Amber Tuccaro was an Indigenous woman and she was a mom. And you can imagine being a mom, it's hard work looking after your kids on top of every other thing you have to do. So imagine you're Amber and you decide to go away for a little getaway. You catch a ride into town, leaving your young son in the care of your friend. Then that's it. You are never seen alive again. What makes this case even more heartbreaking is the fact that the police sworn to help you dismiss your disappearance as nothing. Let's get into it. Amber Alyssa Tuccaro was born on 3rd January 1990 in Alberta, Canada. When she was just a baby, she was adopted by her parents, Vivian Tutsi and Andrew Tuccaro. Andrew and Vivian already had 4 sons, so Amber came in as the baby of the family. She was also the only girl, and the family were proud members of the Mickey Sioux Cree First Nation community, and they lived in Fort McMurray, and I really hope I pronounced that right. Amber grew up in a happy home, and she was known for being the apple of her mom's eye. She was a joy in the family. She loved to sing and dance, and her 4 brothers were extremely protective of Amber. Amber had big dreams, and she would talk about how one day she was going to be a big star. Those that knew her and loved her said that she was extremely funny and she loved to make people laugh. When Amber was around 18, she gave birth to a baby boy that she named Jacob. Amber absolutely loved Jacob. He was her everything. Even though she was quite young when she gave birth to Jacob, she took her role as a mom extremely seriously. She was very protective of Jacob. They would love to sing and dance together, and Amber would sing his favorite song to him, which was "You Are My Sunshine." Amber had goals of giving Jacob a beautiful life. She wanted to have a place of her own, and she sought help from an organization called Unity House, which would help people find homes, but it proved to be more difficult for Amber, so she eventually just moved back in with her mom. And this worked well for them. Living at home, she was super close with her mom, Vivian, and they all loved Jacob. On 17th August 2010, Amber was visited by a friend that she had made through Unity House. This friend's name was never shared, and what happened that day is she dropped by the family home to visit Amber and Jacob. When she was there, she invited Amber together with Jacob on a trip with her to Edmonton, Canada. Amber was super excited to be invited and go, but her mom, Vivian, was a little bit unsure. Amber placated her mom and she told her that, it's only a 2-day trip and we're going to be back before you know it. This female friend was the one to book the plane tickets, and the next day, literally the next day, Amber, Jacob, and this female friend, they were on a flight from Fort McMurray to Edmonton. Once they arrived in Edmonton, they chose to stay in a motel because it was going to be a lot cheaper than staying directly in the city. So they chose to stay in a place called Nisku Motel, which wasn't too far away from the city of Edmonton, I believe like a 30-minute drive. So that same night, between 7:30 and 8:30 p.m., Amber decides that she wants to head out into the city of Edmonton. So she asks this female friend if she can watch Jacob for her, and Amber set off into the town. Now, this is where parts get choppy because this female friend either didn't know where Amber was going or this information just wasn't released. We don't know what Amber was planning to do in the city that night. I feel like this information is just kept private because A, you don't agree to watch someone's kid unless you know where the parent, is going usually. And I don't believe this female friend and Amber were extremely close. And B, Amber loved Jacob. I highly doubt she wanted to leave Jacob without a valid reason. And she was known to never leave Jacob with anyone for a long period of time. So why would this be any different just because they were in a different city? If anything, I feel like Amber would have been more protective of Jacob. So some reports say that she had gone to buy groceries that night. And then some reports say that she just wanted to go out for a night in the city. Now, Amber did not catch an Uber. She didn't take a taxi or public transport. She hitchhiked. I believe this is something Amber would do occasionally, and her mom, Vivian, was not thrilled, that she would do this, and she would warn her about the dangers of hitchhiking. And she told her that, look, if you're going to do this, at least when you do it, call someone you know, so that they know where you're at, so that it can prevent anything bad from happening to you, that the person you're catching the ride from would know that you're on the call with someone, so they wouldn't try anything with you. And I think this is smart. And while it's not going to, completely protect you, it would hopefully deter anyone from trying to harm you. But it wouldn't hurt, right? So Amber hitchhiked, and then eventually an unknown male stopped his car and offered Amber a ride into town. Amber gets into the car and she remembers what her mom said. So she calls her brother. Now, Amber's brother, I believe it was Paul that she called, but I could be wrong, but I believe it was Paul. And her brother was in prison at the time. So by default, these calls are automatically recorded. I don't know if Amber did this on purpose, if she knew that it was being recorded, but this call is recorded for the entire 17 minutes that Amber is with this man in the car. Later that night, Amber does not return back to the motel. By the next day, when Amber is still not back, this female friend calls Amber's mom, Vivian, and lets her know. And Vivian is immediately concerned. This was not like Amber. She, first of all, would never leave Jacob for that long. That was the first sign. She knew something was wrong. So she called the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, known as the RCMP, and Vivian reports Amber as missing. The RCMP, though, did not agree and did not take Amber's disappearance seriously. They instead told her that Amber was probably out, still partying, and would call her eventually. The police were not helpful, not immediately after Amber's disappearance, and not later. Vivian did not agree with their statement because she knew her daughter. She knew that Amber would never leave Jacob for this long. And she would never leave him this long with a female friend that she didn't even know that well. By 4th September 2010, it's now 2 weeks since Amber was last seen, and the RCMP are still like, no, she's still in Edmonton, guys. She's going to call you eventually. Just chill. They stated that they did not believe that Amber was in any trouble. From what evidence? What leads? Did they even investigate this? Now, this was just their first time dropping the ball in this case. They dropped all the balls later on. No one had seen Amber since August 18th, but just a month later, the RCMP took down her missing persons profile from their online database of missing persons. And they did this despite the fact that a couple weeks prior, a couple tips of sightings of Amber had come through from the public. They still thought it was nothing. A woman missing, an Indigenous woman, that too, who had no history of this, who rarely left her very young child, with anyone for long periods of time, and a woman who vanished without a trace. It was nothing. Amber's family felt that these decisions affected her case, that her disappearance could not be investigated properly if her name was taken off the list. So they fought to get her name back on the missing persons database, and a month later it was back on. Then, if that wasn't enough, 9 months later, Amber's still missing, and they decide, the RCMP decide, to destroy all of Amber's belongings from the hotel room without storing it, without even offering her family if they wanted to take possession of it. No evidence left behind. Nothing of Amber's, except her son, left to investigate. On top of that, her belongings from the motel room were just sitting there for months, unprocessed. The evidence was never looked into. They had lost crucial time and leads. Let's not sugarcoat anything, right? Vivian believed that the RCMP were playing into the harmful stereotypes that Indigenous people fall into. But I was like, assuming that Amber has been partying for weeks, what were they thinking? Vivian wasn't even interviewed by the RCMP until 4 months after Amber went missing. The female friend, the last person that knew Amber to see her alive, wasn't even interviewed till months later. This, together with basically every decision the RCMP made, was highly criticized as it showed such neglect and urgency for the safety of a missing Indigenous woman. Now, if you're like me, you're probably like, hold on, Amber was talking to her brother in prison at the time she was on her way to Toronto with this mystery man, and the call was being recorded. So when was this looked into? Couldn't find any solid information when it was actually looked into. I'm sure that the police, that would have been one of the first things they looked into, but actually I take that back given how many balls they dropped. But if you just listen to the call, it's so creepy. I mean, the tiny little snippet that was released to the public is so creepy. You just know something bad happened. And if the police was privy to the entire 17 minutes, come on. So in August of 2012, the RCMP releases a 1-minute clip of the 17-minute call recording. Prior to this recording being released, they go to Amber's family and they're like, hey, yeah, guys, so you remember Amber, right? No, your sister. Yeah, I think she's been murdered. No shit. Now, kind of answering my question from before, Amber's brother Paul was like, the RCMP has been in possession of this recording, the 17-minute recording, for over a year. It was the only time in Canadian history that the RCMP had publicly released an audio recording during a homicide investigation. So here's the snippet that they released. If I can't insert the audio recording in here, I'm gonna read through a bit of the transcript for you guys. So Amber is heard speaking to this unknown male who offered her a ride into town, and she's sort of talking to the man, but she's also on the phone to her brother, talking to her brother.
Where are we by?
We're just heading south of Beaumont, or north of Beaumont.
We're heading north of Beaumont. Yo, where are we going?
Just
No, this is Are you f***ing kidding me? You better not take me anywhere I don't want to go. I want to go into the city. Jeez. Yo, we're not going into the city, are we?
We're going.
No, we're not.
Yes.
Then where the f*** are these roads going to?
50th Street.
50th Street. Are you sure?
Absolutely.
Yo, where are we going?
50th Street.
50th Street?
50th Street.
East, right? Over town.
Bravo.
In this recording, it sounds like Amber is highly suspicious and slightly distressed, unsure in which direction they're heading. To me, it's pretty obvious the man is being shady and not being honest in which direction they're driving. He says, we're going south. No, north. North was towards the city, the direction they should have been going. So it is believed that they were actually, in fact, heading south. Also, you hear the man say gravel before the line cuts, and police believe the man was taking Amber southeast along the rural roads of Leduc County instead of north towards Edmonton. And this would explain the bumpy and distorted call and the gravel roads. Also, people from the area stated that the motel that Amber was staying at, the area where she was picked up from, all those roads around those areas were paved. So they would have been heading in the opposite direction, like the rural side of town. And the area this man would have been taking her to were mostly farmlands and less populated. Also, she wanted to go to 50th Street, right? And the motel, Nisku Motel, to 50th Street would have only been 10 minutes. The recording was already over 17 minutes. Hence, the public's belief that this man was driving Amber through random back roads, trying to confuse her and disorient her. So after this recording was released, there was some sort of a breakthrough 3 separate women came forward claiming that they had recognized the man's voice on the recording. All 3 of these separate women all identified the exact same man. But after being investigated by the RCMP, this man was cleared of any involvement. Which, guys, I mean, I don't know. The RCMP doing any type of investigation does not really give me the confidence that they did the right thing after all their mistakes. What did they do to clear him when they went to interview this guy? If they even did, this guy just changed his voice and they're like, no, it's not him. It's not him, guys. I just need more info. And they also never released the description of the car that Amber was picked up in, because somebody did see her and obviously gave a description of the car. Like, did it match this guy's freaking car? Was anything cross-checked? Because I just don't know. So one of the women who had come forward with evidence about this man made a statement referring to the RCMP saying, "They didn't look very hard, I don't think. I knew the voice like I know the back of my own hand." And for me, that's really tough because, you know, if somebody's going to be like, I know that voice like the back of my own hand, like, I'm not saying, okay, yep, he's guilty, but investigate him a little bit further. Like, I don't know, like, from what I read, it just didn't seem like there was much done. Vivian shared this recording every day, urging people with any information to come forward. Paul, her brother, has also expressed his desire in the recording being shared so that more people could recognize the voice. Then, on 1st September 2012, a human skull was found. A group of horseback riders stumbled across these remains in Leduc County. They immediately contacted the police. The area where the skull was found south of Nisku Motel, where Amber was picked up. The police searched the area for 2 days, and the remains were identified through dental records as belonging to Amber Tuccaro. No cause of death was released. Police claimed that the release of the audio recording and the fact that her remains were found so closely together were not connected, even though they were found literally within days of each other. Now that Amber's remains were found, the case was taken over by the RCMP's KARE unit, which is a special unit that focuses on the homicide and disappearances of vulnerable populations. Amber's death was deemed as suspicious. Now that Amber's death was being treated as a homicide, the fact that partial remains of 4 other women had been previously found within kilometers of where Amber's remains were found, theories began pouring in that this was the work of a serial killer, and the RCMP was not ruling out this possibility. The 4 women whose partial remains were found are Edna Bernard, who went missing on September 22nd, 2002, Katie Sylvia Ballantyne, who went missing on April 28th, 2003, Dolores Brower, who went missing on May 15th, 2004, and Corey Ottenbright, who went missing on May 9th, 2004. And guys, all 4 of these women were Indigenous, and all of them were hitchhiking at the time they went missing. But no connection was ever made between these 5 murders. Come on, guys. Come on, RCMP. In 2013, the RCMP put up billboards in relation to Amber's, death, and they would continually move these billboards around to different locations so that as many people as possible could see them and hopefully report something. On 20th March 2014, Vivian filed a complaint with the Commission for Public Complaints about the RCMP. This complaint brought up many issues with the investigation. The fact that Amber's disappearance was not properly investigated for weeks. The fact that officers were not trained or did not follow procedure. The fact that they removed her name from the missing persons database. The fact that they destroyed the leftover evidence from that motel room, to name a few. The family claimed multiple times that the RCMP fumbled the case, and this was due to racial bias. This was disputed, and in total, 17 recommendations were made to amend RCMP policy and procedure to ensure that this never happens again. In 2009, the family of Amber Tuccaro received a formal apology on behalf of the RCMP for their deficient investigation. The Tuccaros did not accept the apology and were seeking compensation, according to their lawyer. In September 2019, Amber's family filed paperwork saying that they wanted to exhume Amber's remains and send it in for DNA testing, as they could not be certain that the human skull that they found was actually Amber's. And do you blame them? How can they trust the police? And they were hoping to compare Jacob's DNA to the skull's DNA to either confirm or deny that it belonged to Amber. In January 2020, there was this guy who alleged on Facebook that it was his father that was responsible for Amber's death, together with the deaths of other women. But again, this was dismissed. And this was due to the fact that some of the cases he was talking about were already solved. They also claimed that this man had made false allegations about his father in the past. Amber's family have refused to comment on this man's allegations. Vivian is raising Jacob and says he is just like his mom, the way he speaks and his witty attitude. She says Jacob misses his mom and asks what happened to her. Oh, I don't want to think about that too much. Whew. And Amber's case remains open. Her family wants us to talk about Amber so that her name stays relevant and they can hopefully find out what happened to her. The unknown male on the recording is still a person of interest, and the Tuccaro family are still searching for answers. Vivian says she would be like, Mom, one of these days you're going to be laughing when I'm going to be a big star. I'll be on those big boards and stuff like that. Well, what goes and happens? She's on billboards, but not the way we would have liked. I'll leave a link below if you're interested in learning about the rate of missing and murdered Indigenous people. For decades, Native Americans and Alaska Native communities have struggled with high rates of assault, abduction, and murder of their women. I've written down some stats here. So, a 2016 study by the National Institute of Justice found that more than 4 in 5 American Indian and Alaska Native women, which is 84.3%, have experienced violence in their lifetime, including 56.1% who have experienced sexual violence. In the year leading up to the study, 39.8% of American Indian and Alaska Native women have experienced violence, including 14.4% who have experienced sexual violence. Overall, more than 1.5 million American Indian and Alaska Native women have experienced violence in their lifetime. I'm not sure if Amber's remains were exhumed and tested. I couldn't find any update on that, but it would be really interesting to know. But guys, this case has literally given me the chills for years. It's so creepy. Like, what the frick happened? We can all assume, but as if we can't find out. I feel like there has to be more evidence, you know? Someone has to have seen something and it just wasn't taken seriously enough. Also, 3 women confirming the same guy all at different times? Come on, what are the stats on that? And all 3 women are still convinced that it's that guy. Now, I also watched that chapter's video on this case years ago, and I remember at the end he talks about people's encounters with this man. And he is an untreated sex offender. And I believe all of this discussion takes place online on like forums and Reddit, stuff like that. He basically owns this ranch in the area and he goes through extensive planning to secure a victim. Some of his offenses were picking up underage prostitutes and choking them and exploiting underage girls outside of Edmonton. And he basically places ads online for people to come and work on his ranch on a volunteer basis. Like, he would provide them food and a place to stay in exchange for labor on his ranch. Then once people will come and work for him, like, weird shit happened. There's like full posts warning people about this guy. It's wild. And I'm not sure if the police just don't do anything about it or there's like nothing they can do because he hasn't been caught, you know, doing anything bad. That chapter goes into a lot more detail about him. He talks about at the end of his video. And he goes through all the people's stories. And I don't want to just jack his research. So I'll link his video down below if you're interested in learning more about it. Oh, this guy gives me the chills. Like, totally seems like the police should be investigating him. And I'm hoping they already have at some point and continue to, because this guy really sounds like a scary guy. What do you guys think happened? I mean, Vivian still hopes that Amber is alive, and, you know, I pray that if she is, she's not stuck in some immense pain. But then how can she not be? She's not around her family. She's not around her son. I pray for her family, her beautiful, sweet boy, Jacob. And this family has been through so much, and it's like they're going to continue going through this until we find out what happened to Amber. I can't help but think what would have happened if a different police team were on this case. But either way, it's super important to just keep Amber's name out there. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below, guys. And I will see you in next week's video. Besitos. Bye.